Hey everyone, Sweet Johnny Cage here, back with a storytime video. This time I'd like to talk to you about my time in college. And the reason that I'm choosing to do this topic as like the first big story topic is it is November 17th, 2021 right now. And on Facebook, I keep seeing like these memories that pop up, like on this day in X year you did this. And at this point in 2006, I was very miserable. I was pretty depressed, and my status updates really reflected it. It wasn't like any emo stuff like, I'm in pain or anything like that. It was just like, I don't want to be here. Or like, I'm coming home 4 hours until I leave, like that sort of stuff. And so that was 15 years ago in 2006. So we'll start there. I also want to give a precursor to this story is that I had some life events happen my senior year of high school, and that precluded me from doing really any college tours or like going to tour campuses and stuff. I won't get into what all that was. It's not entirely relevant, and it's a much heavier topic that maybe I'll share one day. But in any event, that's sort of why this process was seem a little rushed or under prepared for, and that is what happened. So like I said, I graduated in 2006 from high school, and I was a pretty good student in high school. I wasn't like a straight A student or anything, but I was in AP classes, and I also took, we had a program called Scale in my high school, and I'm from Long Island, and that's like a suburb of New York City for those who don't know. And we had a program that was run through Long Island University. At that time, it was called CW Post, which I think it might sort of still be. But anyway, where high school seniors could apply to take these classes if they were offered in their high school. And they were college level classes, 100 level classes, but they were taught by your high school teachers. So the high school teachers were sort of like adjunct professors of a sort. And if you applied for these classes and you got accepted and you passed these classes, you were automatically accepted to CW Post for your freshman year of college. And those credits transferred directly. It was not like, okay, these count as elective credits because they're just general college credits. It's like, no, you passed this class, this college class, so you don't have to take it anymore. So I was in that class. I was in some AP classes. So I did pretty well, but I wasn't like a straight A student. I never did homework. Even in AP classes, I didn't do too much homework. I just did not like homework. So I would have been a straight A student had I done homework. But I decided to go to a school called SUNY Potsdam. And this is like a state school in Potsdam, New York. And if you look on a map where Potsdam is compared to Long Island or New York City, it's nowhere near it. It's in the sticks. It's upstate near Canada. It's pretty far away. The reason I decided to go to this school was because my girlfriend at the time had decided to go there. And that is the worst reason to ever decide to go to a college. I don't care if your friends are going or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whoever, your partner, doesn't matter. Do not go to a school just because they're going there. It's the worst decision you can make. That romantic relationship will not last. That's my experience, and that's literally the experience of anybody I've ever spoken to. So one of the things I want to kind of talk about before we get too deep into college is a bit of my background. And I'll start off by saying that neither of my parents went to college. My dad did not graduate high school. He was actually kicked out of high school. And he got his GED some years later, like well after I was born. And both my parents were very successful in their careers. Really my family was like college was not a thing that anybody had done, except my sister was really like the first one. She's a few years older than me. And my parents were not necessarily like, you have to go to college, you have to go to college. But they did really stress on me and my sister that we have to get good grades. This way we get into good schools. So even though they weren't pressuring us to necessarily go to college, there was a lot of indirect pressure to go to college, if that makes any sense. Like I said, neither of my parents went to college. My dad didn't graduate high school, and he was self-employed and did very well for himself and still does. But it was like, if you don't go to college, then You just got to work. You got to do something. And I did not like working with my dad. It's not that I like dislike working with him, but I just don't like manual labor. It's not my thing. So I'm good at it. It's just like not something I really want to do. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go to school. The other thing is that because I was in AP classes and college level classes, my friends in those classes were all pretty smart. And what I mean by that is they were getting into some really good schools. A friend of mine went to Dartmouth. A couple of my friends went to Northeastern. What is it called? I can't remember. It's some school in Virginia and Jamestown. A couple friends went to UCLA, NYU. A girl I graduated high school with is now like the head writer of SNL. Like we went to a really good high school, and like a lot of these kids got into great schools. And then there was me, who like hadn't really gone on college tours and really didn't have a direction for college. And so this is like a real like first world problem, but it's a real problem in high school, where if you don't necessarily track with the same kids, like you're in an AP class, your friends are going to these crazy colleges and like seem to have things kind of figured out for themselves, but you don't. You feel a lot of like very implicit peer pressure or indirect peer pressure from them to match them. And like you kind of get embarrassed if you're going to just a state school, or maybe if you're just going to stay home and go to community college, which there's nothing wrong with. But because you're like 16, 17 years old, it just feels different. It feels very, very intense, and you want to keep up and you want to fit in. And if you never felt that way, great. That's great for you, but I did. And so that was a big thing. That's really one of the reasons I went to college too, was because I remember vividly one day in AP US history, I think it was, or AP government, we were literally going around the room, like talking about where we're going to college. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to Potsdam. And then like the kid next to me was going to like Princeton or something. Like it was crazy. So anyway, there was like some indirect peer pressure there, and also indirect pressure from my parents. So decided to go to Potsdam because my girlfriend was going there. Big mistake. I also went there, decided to go there, and accepted the offer before I'd even gone to the campus once. I literally never visited it. I didn't really know where it was. It just looked nice in the brochure. Of course it did. But accepted it, and that summer, I think it was July, they had like a parent weekend where the student and a parent could go up to the school and spend the weekend there, and the student would, or the kid would sort of like get a feel for the campus, get a feel for the town that the school is in. There were some activities to do, kind of get a tour of the lecture halls and where you would go to class. You stay in a dorm room. It's like a big thing. I think a lot of schools do this. And while the students are doing that, the parents who also stay over, I think they get like a bunch of information about the school, and like what to expect from your student, maybe things to look out for. I've actually never asked my dad what went on during this. But for that weekend, I actually slept in the car ride, which is incredibly rare for me. I cannot sleep in cars, but for some reason I slept on this trip. And so I did not realize how far away it actually was. And I think had I known, I would have changed my mind. But anyway, one of the things that the parents did, though, this is just a little aside, they had the parents write a letter to their kids, and then the letter would be like delivered to them in the first couple weeks of class. And so my dad wrote this like really sweet letter to me. And he's not like a very eloquent person. He's sort of like a blue collar dude. And, but he wrote this very sweet letter basically saying like, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying it. Very proud of you. And it's just very nice to receive. And I still have it somewhere. But so that weekend happens. And I'm like all excited to go to school. I'm really just excited to like get out of the house. Me and my mom had a bit of a contentious relationship growing up at times, so I was just like excited to like be on my own. And so I go up there, and when I tell you I immediately knew I did not want to be there, I would say within the first 48 hours, I was like, oh, this isn't a good idea. So I remember I got a new MacBook for college. That's like the thing. I don't know if kids still do that, but like in my generation, it was like, you're going to college, your big gift, your big graduation present or whatever is a laptop for school. So I got a MacBook Pro. so I could game on it, so I could still play WoW because I was still raiding at the time. And I move in, do all that. My roommate was actually from upstate New York, so he didn't move in the same weekend I did. He actually came a few days later. So I kind of had the dorm room to myself for a little while, which is kind of nice. And I remember being on FaceTime. I don't know if it was called FaceTime at the time, but I was FaceTiming with a friend of mine who had just moved into Northeastern, and she noticed that my door was not open, like my dorm room door. And she was like, "Why isn't your door open?" I was like, "What do you mean? It's like my room." She's like, "Yeah, but like so people in your hall can like come see you and say hi and introduce themselves." I was like, "Oh, they do that?" Like I had no idea like what I was doing. So, there were a couple kids from high school that were there, so I hung out with them and my girlfriend at the time. And so as time went on, I realized I really do not fit in here. I'm a kid from the suburbs of New York City. I kind of grew up going to the city and like playing Street Fighter and Chinatown Fair, and not I would never call myself like a city kid, but I would say I'm street smart. Like I know my way around cities. I'm comfortable in cities. I'm comfortable in mass crowds of millions of people. Like it's very normal to me. And so when I'm speaking with kids there who are from upstate New York or from like neighboring areas, they would talk about like living on a farm, or what they do on a Friday night is they go to the Walmart parking lot and drink. And that was so strange to me. Like if that's what you do, fine, that's cool. I understand that now. But at the time it's like I would get on a train and go to Manhattan. Like that's what I would do on a weekend. I don't hang out in a parking lot. Like but there was literally that's how their towns were. Walmart was the epicenter. And so I just felt very out of place. And like I even had teachers who were from where I'm from, like from the New York City area. And I remember a teacher once told me, I was taking the class was bioethics and law, and I was interested in being a lawyer at the time. And the teacher said to us, "If you ever want to hide a body, come to Potsdam, New York. Like it's literally the middle of nowhere, and no one would ever find it." That's a terrible joke, but that's really how it was. So I realized that I was like not fitting in with anybody except for my friends from high school. And it's not difficult for me to make friends. I can talk to a brick wall. I really can. I'm a chatty Cathy, and I've been told that I'm easy to talk to, and I am very welcoming. But for some reason, I just couldn't jive with these kids. The other thing that really affected me was the weather. So coming from the New York City area, we get like ocean weather patterns. So like we get hurricanes a few times a year, but it's very like beachy. You know what I mean? Like clear blue skies, not many overcast days in a row we get here. It's very temperate. You know what I mean? Like it's very what I would consider like normal weather. Upstate New York, however, gets lakefront weather. And so it's right near the Great Lakes. And so you get a lot of rain, a lot of overcast. The weather systems there just sort of like stick around, and they stick around for like weeks at a time. Like you will not see the sun for a week sometimes. And you wake up, it's raining. You go to sleep, it's raining. You wake up, it's misting, but it's still overcast. Like it's just miserable weather. And if you're not used to it, it can really affect you. And it really affected me. I wouldn't say that I have like seasonal affective disorder, sad. But if I go too long without seeing the sun, it definitely starts to affect me. And so a few weeks, I would say like a month into being there, my girlfriend and I broke up. We lived in the same hall, which was not planned, but we lived in the same hall, and we just didn't see each other much. Like it's college. Like you try to make new friends. You try to do things. I was friends with my roommate. We got along fine. But I was becoming increasingly depressed, and I would just spend a lot of time playing World of Warcraft. I would sort of miss class every once in a while. Like I really wasn't a great college student. And so when I broke up with her, I would say a few weeks later, like 2 weeks later, she started going out with the kid who lived in the dorm room next door to me. So I literally could not escape this girl. It was terrible. And I think they stayed together for a while. She stayed at that school for a long time. I think she might have graduated from there. But anyway, yeah, so that was a trip. I broke up with her. She started dating the kid who lives next door. It was really wild. and she lived in my hall. So I literally was always around this girl even after we broke up. So this is like, I'd say, the midpoint of the story here. So there was a Dance Dance Revolution tournament happening at an event in New York City called Digital Life. It's not a thing anymore, but it was happening. And I asked my friend Max to come up, pick me up, and then we would drive back, and then he would drive me up, and he would drive home. And, like, he was down for this. We took plenty of road trips together. He was always down for a road trip, and he was excited. Like, he likes nature. He likes hiking. Like, he was excited about this area. I wasn't. And so he picked me up. We went back down home, and then we went to the DDR tournament. And then he was supposed to drive me back on Sunday. And then he calls me Sunday morning, and he's like, hey, my mom does not want me driving up there again. She thinks it's too dangerous. To his defense, it is a little dangerous driving up there at times. And so I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I tell my mom, and she's like, well, that really sucks. But I guess just take your car and drive up there. And I don't know if it's the same way anymore, but generally college freshmen cannot have cars on campus. I've heard that rule in a lot of schools. But for some reason, my school was okay with it. I think because kids come from so far away. But also it's sort of in like a rural area, so it's a bit more accepted. Kids generally learn to drive earlier there. So I was able to get a parking pass and do the whole thing. And so at this point, I wouldn't say I was fully miserable, but I was getting pretty close. And I remember talking to my mom. This might have even been in September. I forgot to mention this. But a couple weeks into school, I was talking to my mom, and she asked me how things were going. I was like, they're going okay. Class is fine, but I really don't like it here. I don't think I would want to come back next semester. She was like, do you just want to come home now and go to Nassau, which is Nassau Community College? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, that's fine. If you really don't want to be there and you don't think it's going to go well, just come home and enroll in Nassau. It's fine. Because Nassau hadn't started yet. Their classes started in September. And I was like, no, I'll stick it out. To this day, I kind of regret trying to stick it out because I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, so now I have my car up there. It's mid-October, and I'd asked my mom, like, is it cool if I come home on the weekends? Like, do you mind if I drive back? Like, it is a little dangerous driving, so I just want to make sure she was okay with it because it's technically her car. It's just the one I used. She was like, if you want, yeah, like I could send you gas money and you could just come home. That's fine. And then she's like, why don't you see if anybody else wants to come with you and then, like, maybe try to get them to chip in for gas money. I had no problem finding 3 people to come home with me every weekend. I came home every single weekend after that point. And those are the Facebook memories that I keep seeing now is 4 hours until I get out of here. I would leave after class on Thursday, if I went to class at that point, drive home, be home for like 2.5 days. Friday, Saturday, I would drive home Sunday. And I even went back to the grocery store I worked at and asked for my job back on weekends, and my boss was gracious enough to give it to me. So this is where it starts to get dicey. I stopped going to class entirely because I was very depressed, and I was just in like a lot of emotional pain. Like I really hated being there. I missed my friends. I missed my family. I didn't like the environment, like the literal weather environment. I didn't like it. I did not fit in there. And it got to the point where I was not suicidal or anything. I never had thoughts like that. But I've learned through therapy now that like I have a tendency to avoid conflict. And I was avoiding the conflict of calling my parents and saying, I no longer want to be here. Please let me come home. And so it got so bad that I was at the point where I had to stop going to class completely. I lied to my parents and told them I was going and everything was fine. I missed all my midterms. I blew way past the allotted absences in these classes, and I would just sit in my dorm and play WoW, and I would farm, if you ever played World of Warcraft during vanilla, I would farm rich thorium veins in Hearthglen Western Plaguelands for hours every single day. It's all I would do. Maybe I would run Scholomance every once in a while, or UD Strat. That was it. Did that day in, day out. And it got so bad, I came out of my dorm room so few times that kids in my hall who were in classes with me would knock on my door and say, John, are you okay? You didn't come to class again today. And I would just yell from the inside of the room, yeah, I'm fine. It's all good. And they would walk away. And like people were literally worried about me. But again, I did not have any sort of harm thoughts or anything like that. So the weekend before Thanksgiving. So mind you, Thanksgiving's on a Thursday. My last day of classes that week would have been Wednesday. So I literally came home, was going to go back and only go to class for 3 days, or go to class for 3 days. I still wanted to come home the weekend before. I did not want to spend a weekend in Potsdam, New York. Also, that was the week that the Wii came out. I think that was November 13th, 2006, if I recall correctly. Wii release date. November 18th, No, that's the Wii U. Wii release date. November 19th, 2006. I was so close. Anyway, so that was the week the Wii was going to come out. And the plan was that I would camp out at Target, I think, with my friends and buy it. And I think I was going to flip it at the time because I was a broke college student, didn't really have the money. But that was the plan. So we were going to camp out Sunday, buy it, and then I would drive back. It didn't happen. I slept past my alarm, and so I was, at this point, so like I said, I had 3 friends that I would drive back every weekend with. This one weekend, they did not want to go back because they were like, it's a waste. Maybe we got the day before Thanksgiving off or something like that. Like, it was only 2 days that week of class. But they didn't want to come home with me. They're like, nah, it's a waste. We'll just come home with you for Thanksgiving. So I drove home alone in the pitch black of night in upstate New York. Drove home alone and then, worked a couple days and then slept through my alarm on Sunday, missed the camp out, and then, it was a wrap. And as a result of sleeping through that alarm, I left my house pretty late. And in upstate New York and in rural areas of the country, there's not really any streetlights. So I did not want to drive in the pitch black of these places because some of the driving is a little dangerous. You have like 1-lane roads where you have a cliff face, like literally just a rock face on this side and a lake on this side, and like a 12-foot drop to the lake with a flimsy guardrail. Like, it's pretty dangerous driving sometimes in the darkness. And of course, you get people who like just don't turn on the headlights. It's pretty dangerous sometimes. So, in order to get there as fast as possible, I was driving really fast. And I didn't get into an accident or anything, but I could have caused one easily. So I pulled over at a rest stop just outside of Albany, New York, which is the capital here, about 2.5 hours outside of Long Island. And, I go to the bathroom, get a snack, and then I'm leaving the rest stop. I pulled out of that rest stop. Like, it had a long entrance ramp back onto, I think it was I-87 or I-95 that turns into 88 or 87 or something like that. And I pulled out, I sped up so fast that I blew past a state trooper who was facing the other way on the other side of the highway, going 91 miles an hour. And then the state trooper was able to drive, turn around, and catch up to me and clock me doing 91 miles an hour. Like, he rode my bumper doing 91 miles an hour. And he pulls me over, and here in New York, we have something called PBA cards. If you have, a relative or a friend who's a police officer, they get these cards. They're, the size of a credit card that fit in your wallet. And it just, says Police Benevolent Association. It's from the police union. I don't have these anymore. I realized my ex-girlfriend actually told me this is corruption. That's all this is, plain and simple. And she was right. And so I threw them out. But I had PBA cards at the time. And basically, if you get pulled over for something minor, you have a taillight out, or maybe you're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit or something like that, or you didn't signal, you can generally hand the cop a PBA card. And as long as everything is in order and you weren't doing anything dangerous, they're okay, just don't do it again. So doing 91, state trooper pulls me over. PBA cards do not work on state troopers. They hate them. Rightfully so. And so I hand my license, registration, insurance, and the PBA card to the guy. I'm like, I don't know if this will help me out, but my uncle's a detective, retired. He gave me this. And then the guy just threw it back in my car. He's like, no, it's not going to work. And he's like, do you know how fast you're going? And this was really stupid. I lied. And I was like, 65? And he was like, no, try again. I was like, 75. And he's like, nope, try again. I was like, 85. He's like, nope, 91 miles an hour. And he was like, and you lied, so I'm definitely giving you this ticket right now. So or he said, you tried to lie, so I'm definitely giving you this ticket. And he was right to do this. So he goes back to his trooper car, prints his ticket, gives it to me, and there was no fee on it. Like, there was no price on it or cost or whatever. It was like a summons. I had to appear in court for this ticket. And I called my dad, or I might have called my mom. And like, I was a dumb 18-year-old kid who had never gotten a ticket before. So I thought that this was just going to be like a cheap, $100 ticket or something like that. And it wasn't a big deal. And so like, when I was telling my parents like what I was doing, they were like, "You're an idiot." Like, they were kind of yelling at me. And they were like, "There's no way. Like, you might get your license taken away. Like, if you're going 30 miles an hour above the speed limit, that's reckless endangerment." Like, the speed limit was 65. I was doing 24 miles an hour, 26 miles an hour over the speed limit, like pretty close to reckless endangerment. So I'm definitely going to get points on my license, and it may just get taken away, and the fine is going to be insane. So they're pretty pissed. And so it's like, all right, whatever. So I just drive back the rest of the way, pretty slow. It's very dark. I hate it. And so get there. A few days later, me and my friends leave for Thanksgiving break. Drive home. It's all good. Hey, so really weird edit here, but I watched the playback of this whole thing and realized I left out a really important piece of information, a big event that happened. So I got fired from a job that I worked at a grocery store. And so after I graduated high school, I quit this job and went to work at a cell phone store. And then I did that for the summer. And then when I decided I was coming back every weekend, I went back to the grocery store and said to my boss, Kevin, "Hey, can I work here again on the weekends? Like, here's what I'm doing. I'm coming home all the time." He was like, "Yeah, sure. Like, we have room for you." And I was like, "Any chance I could get a raise?" Like, I just sort of like pressed my luck, half joking. And he was like, "Okay, like, what do you want?" And it wasn't like name your price. It was reasonable, but it was a very gracious offer. And while I was there, I was stealing DVDs. I would take them off the shelf, buy them, and then return them, and then just keep the receipt. This way, in case anybody checked my bag when I was leaving, I had the receipt, and it says that I bought it. This is a really stupid thing. It was a crime. I'm not proud of it, but it is the truth. And so I stole. It was Tokyo Drift. That was the movie that I stole, and I had stolen others previously, but this is the one I got caught for. So I stole that, and then I went back to school. I think I got the speeding ticket, and then when I came back, I got fired. Or it might have been one before the other, but basically that happened. I got fired, and luckily, my boss did not have me arrested. And folks had been arrested at the store for stealing a lot less. There was a kid whose grandmother worked there for like 20 years. He stole like $50 out of a register. I mean, that's more than worth what I stole, or at least got caught for, so it's not like it was less. But they arrested him. They arrested a girl for stealing dog food. Like, it was pretty militant in terms of like, if you steal, you're getting arrested. But because I was friends with my boss, he convinced the store manager not to have me arrested. And I was very grateful for that. But this was probably the first time in life that I did a thing as an adult and faced, I'd say, like, social consequences. Like, I didn't, no charges were pressed against me. I didn't get arrested, but I lost a very close friend. And I really enjoyed working for this guy. We played WoW together. We raided together. We quested together constantly. I loved talking with him. He was a really cool guy. And he wouldn't talk to me after that, obviously. And I lost like a really close friend because of this really stupid thing I did. So it was dumb. It was a crime. And I haven't stolen anything since, but it really was a huge life event. And when I went home that day, I told my mom they fired me for stealing a soda. Like, it was pretty stupid. So I even lied about it. It's pretty dumb. But yeah, so that was like another big thing that I left out, but I'll put the story back, and now you'll know like all three big things that happened in a very short period of time and why things felt like they were starting to fall apart. So here we go. That Thanksgiving dinner, my whole family's calling me Johnny Rocket, so it turned into a bit of a joke. And luckily, and again, this is corruption, but it's just the truth. Luckily, My dad had a friend who was a state trooper who, a few months later when it was time for my court date, I still had to go, but he was able to get the fine reduced for me and I didn't get any points. It was like a few $100s and that was it. So I was very grateful for that. It really helped me out there. But anyway, a few days after Thanksgiving, we go back. And as we're driving back, I really wasn't saying much because I was just like so sad because I felt like it was all kind of crumbling a bit. Like that was like kind of the thing. Like I got that ticket, felt like shit the rest of the week. Now we're driving back and I'm just like not really saying anything. And then we get to this town. Like this is when we got off the interstate, pretty high in upstate New York. And I'd driven through this town plenty of times and there was a fork in the road. So you can either keep going straight or you can veer left and go this way. So that's what I did. 2 minutes after doing that, a state trooper pulls me over. And I'm like, what was I doing? Like, I was literally doing 65 miles an hour, like, or maybe 55. I was like, I wasn't doing anything. So he pulls me over, and I will tell you right now, this was a really frustrating experience with police where the guy pulls me over. He says, you know how fast you're going? I was like, 55. Like I said, it's so definitively. And he was like, you know what the speed limit is? I was like, 55. And he was like, no, it's 45. And I said to him, I was like, I got off the interstate 15 minutes ago. I have not seen a single speed limit sign. I was like, trust me, I would have slowed down had I had seen it. And I've gone through here so many times doing 55 miles an hour because that's what I thought the speed limit was. And then he just sort of shook his head. And then he was like, you also failed to signal at that fork in the road. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean I feel like, one, who signals at a fork in the road? Like, basically an abandoned road in the middle of nowhere. Like, who does this? And so he, like, gave me the ticket for failing to signal at a fork in the road. And the reason I think he gave me this ticket is because there really was no speed limit sign posted anywhere near this place. And he just wanted to give me something. Like, that's how I still feel to this day. So he gives me the ticket, and at this point, I'm just dead silent in the car. And, like, my friends literally asked me, like, are you okay? And I was like, no, like, I'm not doing all right. Like, I hate being here. It's the second fucking ticket I've gotten in a week. And, like, that guy was such an asshole. Like, he was sort of, like, grilling my friends. Like, what are you guys doing? What are you doing up here? Like, where are you coming from? Like, very aggressive. And I just, like, really hated it. And so dropped my friends off at their dorm buildings. And one of the kids I was driving back with every week was this kid, Danny. And I won't say his last name, but it's this kid, Danny. And he, when he got out of the car, he was like, hey, I don't have the gas money on me. I'll go to the ATM in the cafeteria and I'll come back to you. I'll knock on your door. It's like, all right, cool. So I really never told this story publicly. So I'm sitting in my dorm room and I just start hysterically crying. And I felt like everything was going wrong. And like, I really just didn't want to be there anymore. But I couldn't tell my parents I stopped going to class a month ago. They were paying for me to go to this school. I had been lying to them all semester. And I was just miserable. And so I was just crying. And then there's a knock on my door a few minutes later. And it's Danny. And like I hesitated opening the door because I didn't want him to see me crying and I didn't really want to talk to anybody. But something in me just opened the door and he saw me right away and he's like, what's wrong? And he just like came in my room, shut the door. And I told him what was going on, told him this whole story. And then he was like, you just got to call your parents, man. Like they're going to understand. And I was just like, nah, man, they're going to be so pissed. They're going to kill me. Like I really thought my parents were going to throw me out of the house because I lied. And he was like, no, like, trust me, just call them. And like worst comes to worst, I'll call my mom, see if you could stay with her if this happens. Like just call them. You're clearly not doing all right here. Like you really need to just get out of here and you got to call them. So he calmed me down. I was very grateful for that. I still am to this day. And so he leaves and I try to call my parents. My dad picks up and I couldn't even say hello. Like I just started crying again. And then he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I'll call you back in a minute. So I hang up and I actually text him. And I was like, I need to talk to mom. But like, the only way I'm going to get through this is if we talk like over like iMessage, like over chat. So I'm like texting with my mom. on the computer, and I tell her all this stuff, and then she calls me, and she's like, "Just come home. It's fine. Just come home. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't care if you haven't gone to class. Just go to the office, get a withdrawal form, and come home." And I was so relieved. Like, she's like, "You're not grounded. It's fine. We'll figure it out." And I was so relieved. It was one of the rare times in my life where my mom just like was very graceful about something and like really understood that I was going through a very difficult time. And so, I told my roommate, "Hey, on Monday I'm dropping out. Tomorrow morning I'm going to leave." So I packed up all my shit, loaded it into my car, and then I went to the office and I told them like I'm withdrawing. And they were like, "It's November 20 something. The semester ends in 3 weeks. Like, why are you withdrawing now?" And I was like, "I haven't gone to class in the past month. Like, I've failed everything. I don't intend on coming back. I'm leaving." They were like, "Okay, here's the form." Filled it out. Remember, I went back to my dorm room to say goodbye to my roommate and like get the rest of my stuff. And then I got a soda out of the soda machine. And this is so corny, but it is the truth. Like so my car was parked in the parking lot that our dorm room window faced. And so my roommate had like the window open. And as I got to my car, I like yelled his name. I was like, "Eric, Eric." And then he looked at the window. He's like, "What's up?" I was like, "I'm free." And I literally like threw the soda across the lawn. And I was just like so relieved. I was so relieved. And it was the happiest drive back to Long Island that I've ever made in my entire life. So this whole story, and there's a little bit more to this that I'll get into, but the whole Potsdam story is don't rush into college. And if you don't feel good about the school you're going to, tell whoever you need to tell and get the hell out of there. Because you're just going to get depressed, or it's likely that you'll just get depressed. You'll stop going to school. You'll stop talking to your friends. And it's just going to lead to a world of hurt. It's the one piece of advice I can give you is if something feels wrong, listen to that feeling and do whatever you got to do to rectify it. Trust me. So, continuing on a little bit, I then registered at Nassau Community College for the next semester, and I actually did pretty well. I got a D in a programming class, which I'm not a skilled programmer at all. I really don't like it, but this was like a web development program, which I've known how to do since I was like 13 years old. Like I've built websites on MaxPages, GeoCities, whatever stuff you had back in the day. I know how to do basic HTML, and that's what this class was. But the professor gave me a D because how we had to upload it, like, did not update or something like that. And so I actually like went to him and I was like, "Look at the file creation dates. Like, I did all of this work. I've never missed this class. This is like the easiest class for me. How could I have failed this and not turned anything in? Like, you see me working all the time." And granted, I guess I didn't turn it in. I didn't update my web page with the links or anything, but I clearly done the work. And so I actually went to his chairperson because he wouldn't change my grade. And I was waiting outside the chairperson's office, and then in walks my professor. And I walked out. I chickened out because I didn't want it to be like a 2v1 sort of thing. And I didn't have like the wherewithal to like walk into the chairperson's office and be like, "I need to speak to you privately, not with him here." Like I did, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't do it. Now I would have, but I didn't at the time. So I wound up getting a D in that class, but like A's in the rest of them. And then I did okay my second semester. But in between the first and second semester there, I took summer courses. And I took a JavaScript class with the same fucking professor because he's like the only one there. And I failed that. And I also failed a calculus class. And so my parents are pretty pissed about that. And yeah, I remember being in Toys R Us in Times Square waiting for some friends to meet up. They had a DDR machine there at the time. And my parents called me and they're like, "We just got like the Nassau transcript for your summer classes. You failed both of them. Like, what the fuck?" So we had an argument over the phone, and then, they were pretty pissed. And then I went for another semester, and during that, so this was fall 2007 now, and I was doing okay in the beginning of the semester. There are classes, I remember every teacher I had, every class I ever took, except for college, because I just hated it. So I just was not a good college student. But there was a class in that semester that I know I registered for. I know I went once. I couldn't tell you what the class was. Couldn't tell you what it was. I remember the room it was in. I remember sitting in there once and then going back like a few weeks later. Like I took my 3 absences right away and sat in it again. And I was like, what are we doing? What class is this? Like I was a horrible college student. And so I did okay in the other classes, but I was taking a class on phonetics. And I pride myself on having decent diction and having a great vocabulary. And like, I really like language. And so I took a phonetics class and I thought this would be a lot of fun. And it's a very interesting topic. And so I had basically switched my major to English at this point, away from computers. And it was a really cool class for the first few weeks. And then we got assigned like our big project for the year or for the semester. And basically what we had to do was, it was in stages. You had to record somebody who speaks with a different accent, preferably from like a different country if you know them. If not, it's okay. And like being from Long Island, like there's tons of immigrants around here. My family's from Ireland, so it's pretty easy to find. So it wasn't too difficult. But yeah, you had to like tape record them. You couldn't use like a dictaphone, which is like I don't think they've used them anymore, but it's basically like the recording app you have on your phone that stems from dictaphones, where it's just like a little recorder that you put and press record and that's it. You had to use a tape. And so you had to like go out and buy a tape recorder. That was like red flag number 1 for this professor. And then you had to do a bunch of reports on it. But I remember I took French in high school, and I really enjoy French. I don't speak it fluently or anything, but really enjoy the language. And during this phonetics class, my professor, we were talking about like stringing letters together or sounds together, really, when writing and like how things are pronounced. And she asked, like, are there any languages where the rules are different that you can think of? I raised my hand. I said French. She said, okay, what rule are you talking about in French? And I cannot remember what this rule is called, but basically in French, if a letter or if a word ends in a consonant and the next word begins in a vowel, you pronounce that last consonant and you kind of string the sounds together to make the next word. In French, generally the last consonant of a word is not pronounced. But in those cases where it's last letter consonant, first letter vowel, it is. And so I talked about this, and she said, why do you think that is? I was like, well, because the word ends in a consonant, the next one begins in a vowel. And she laughed at me, and in front of the class said, John, don't be so naive. And I was so offended. And I think I might have like walked out of the class. Like, I could not believe a teacher would disrespect a student like that. I was just like beside myself. So anyway, it sort of all went downhill from there. Stopped going to class. I would literally drive to Nassau and sleep in my car. Like, I was doing the same shit again. And so I wasn't telling my parents. I was literally repeating the same cycle. And so there was a fighting game tournament that December called Northeast Championships. And it was in Philadelphia. And this was pretty close to the end of the semester. It was like the first weekend of December. And me and my friends packed up and we drove to Chinatown to go to Chinatown Fair in New York City, the night before. And we were going to drive to Philly from Chinatown. And I remember being very nervous because I was like going to do something with my friends. And like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing at home, which was going to school and getting decent grades. I wasn't doing that. And so the whole time we were in CF, I was very nervous. When I get nervous, I get like a little queasy. And so like I start to sweat and like it's a big psychosomatic reaction. It's like really weird. Am I using that word correctly? That's like the second time I've used that today. Psychosomatic. Caused or of a physical illness or other condition caused or activated by a mental factor such as internal conflict or stress. Yeah, psychosomatic response. And so I was like, I didn't have a panic attack or anything. I've had a panic attack before. This was not that. But I like ran outside, like called my mom, and I was like, look, I'm going to this tournament, but I need to confess to you that I'm failing school again. And I was like, I feel terrible. Like, but I'm sort of freaking out here. Like I was on the corner of Mott and Bowery, which is like a major intersection, right where that Citibank is. If you've ever been there, standing right there, basically like on the phone crying to my mom that I was doing this again. And she was like, okay, school is not for you. Enjoy your tournament, come home, and then you just got to get a full-time job. And I was like, okay, are you sure? She's like, yes, I'm sure. So that's what I did. I just stopped driving to school and sleeping in my car, and I just went and I got a job. I got a job at TD Bank. I was working at a deli at the time when I was in school, which is one of my favorite jobs. But I got a job at TD Bank, and I was there for a couple of years. And this is the end of my college story. Don't worry. I went to school this is like the last third of my story. I realize this is a 40-minute video, but it's a few years of my life. So I worked there for a few years. It's now 2010. And I didn't really have a direction at this point. And so during this time, there were a lot of newspaper articles talking about how air traffic controllers are all retiring soon because they were all hired in the 80s due to a strike, and then the president fired them all and hired new people. So it was like the 25 years are up, basically. And so there's a huge demand for air traffic controllers. And my dad kept telling me about it. And he was like, you don't really have a career direction. Why not go do this? It's a great job. It's great pay, great benefits, forced retirement at 55. Like, you really can't lose with this job. And so I was like, I don't know. We'll see. And then a friend of mine who I worked at the bank with said the same exact thing. And I was like, okay, you're interested. That sounds good. Like, we're pretty similar people. Like, maybe I'd be interested too. And he's like, yeah, there's this school out in Flushing in Queens that I'm going to go check out. It's called Vaughn College. And like, that's where you can go for this program. I'm going to check out the open house there next weekend. You should too. And so I did. And so while I was there, I spoke with an air traffic controller from, I think, LaGuardia. And he was just sort of telling us like, yeah, like, it's a really good job. I just bought my first house. I got a second car. Like, my wife doesn't have to work anymore. The pay is insane. Like, it's a really good job and it's fun. And so I was like, okay, this sounds good. So I enroll, but I paid for it myself. Like, my parents were not going to pay for college anymore. And because I was paying for it for myself, and because this was like a choice that I made for myself, I excelled at college at this point. I was 20, I guess, or no, 22, 23 in 2010. And I just excelled. I did really well. I took calculus, aced it. I mean, I failed at Nassau Community College, but for some reason, there was a professor there that just taught math the way I needed to be taught, where it was very much like concept and history. And like, I learned about the Phoenicians and how they invented like different theorems and different ways to do math. And it was like how they invented negative numbers and like what that all meant. And it was just like a light bulb went off, and I did extremely well in school. And because I had taken several years off and traveled and ran a fighting game tournament called East Coast Throwdown with some friends, and I really just kind of like lived life kind of the way I wanted to live it, in a sense, going back to school on my own volition was a lot easier. And I was so proud of myself because it was only a 2-year degree. I only have an associate's, but I did so well. And like, my professors really took notice of me and sort of like offered me opportunities. Like, air traffic control is a federal job. And so you have to get like security clearance. You've got to do a bunch of stuff. And at that time, my professors were controllers from JFK, from Kennedy Airport. And whenever they would notice like a good student, they would invite them to come like watch them work on a weekend, on like a Sunday morning where traffic isn't too busy. And so I literally got to go to the air traffic control tower at JFK on a Sunday morning and watch traffic get worked. And I got to watch these people basically play God. And it was an incredible experience. And it's one I will never forget. I did it a few times. And because I was so enthusiastic about this program, because I was so enthusiastic about school, and I was doing really well, and I was really applying myself, it was like the first big adult thing I was doing. I felt so much better prepared for school. I really just kind of like threw everything I had into it. And I was still working at the bank at this time. So I basically built my work schedule around my school schedule. So I was doing a lot of night classes. I had full days from like 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. with classes. Like, I was commuting pretty far. Like, it was a big thing, but I did it. and it was not a big deal. Like I did it like it was nothing because it was just so much fun. I actually went up teaching sort of like what I would call like a club class there. A professor of mine who was a controller at Kennedy taught a club called phraseology and something like that, where you basically like control like fake traffic. And unfortunately, the FAA passed a rule saying like if you're an active controller, you cannot have a second job, and that includes teaching. So unfortunately, those teachers got taken out. We got retired controllers, which really isn't the best because the rules change all the time, and like the air traffic rules change all the time. So having folks who are retired and only have knowledge of old rules teaching you is not really the best way to go about it, but it doesn't matter. And so I did really well at this school, and I took the air traffic control exam, which is a test you can only take twice in your life. So if you fail it the first time, or if you're not satisfied with your score the first time, you can only take it one other time. So I took this test, and it's like an 8-hour exam, and they held it at a hotel here in Long Island, or on Long Island. And I remember going there, and there were kids from other schools nearby that had programs for air traffic, and these kids were like pacing up and down the halls, like ready to take this test, very nervous. And I showed up in my pajamas. I'm not joking. I put on pajama pants and like went to this test, and I took the test. I was like one of the first people done, and I got a 97.8 on this test out of 100. And I was through the moon. I was over the moon. I was through the roof, over the moon. Like, I was so proud of myself. I remember waking my mom up the morning that the test scores came in, telling her I got a 97.8. Like, I'm good to go. Like, I just got to graduate, and I'm good. And then, unfortunately, what wound up happening was the government in 2013 had a shutdown, and then they froze all federal hiring. So I was, like, just waiting for my FBI background interview at this point. And then they decided to like throw all the test scores out and do it all different. And then I failed that test somehow. There's a literal lawsuit about it. I'm not part of it, but there is an actual class action lawsuit about that whole debacle. But as that was happening, I was working at a law firm at the time, and I was walking to work one morning during this like hiring freeze. And I remember like I had a bagel in one hand and a coffee in the other hand. I was like looking at this building I was working in at a job I really didn't like. And I was like, I'm doing this until I become an air traffic controller, and I don't even want to be an air traffic controller. Like, I have no passion for this at all. It was just something to do, and it was something I ended up being really good at, and I'm still proud I went to school, and I was at the time. Like, it was just like, I went to school with kids who dreamed of working in aviation or dreamed of being an air traffic controller, and like, I'm here taking spots from them. Like, it's a very competitive job. You know what I mean? Like, you got to do really well, and I did do very well, but like, me doing really well and not caring or not feeling passionate about it is precluding somebody who really loves it, who maybe was just a few points under me, from getting that spot. Like, that's not fair. I really want to work in video games. That's what I want to do. And so I decided then and there, I'm not going to be an air traffic controller. I'm going to work in the gaming industry. And that's another story for another time. But I hope this really long story about my college experience that spans 4 years, or really 6 years, 2006 to 2012, has helped you. What I will say, I would say like the key takeaways of this story is, if you are feeling, it's okay to feel nervous and be a little anxious about college. Like, that's very normal. And I'm not saying if you feel that at all, it's a red flag, but like, just really listen to your gut and don't rush into big decisions. In my opinion, as a 33-year-old person who had this weird college experience that was very up and down, very down and up, I should say, I don't really believe in those like, well, if you could turn back time, what would you do? Like, would you do anything differently? I don't think I would. But the advice I would give to you is listen to your gut. And if your gut is telling you, don't go to college, go do something else, go do something else. That is what you need to listen to. I get it. You're 17, 18. You don't really have full control over your life, and maybe your parents are forcing you to go to college. I can't help you there. Like, that's a discussion you just got to have with your parents. And if they buck, great. If not, find someone else to help you. Like, I don't have advice for that. My family was fortunately very gracious to me both times I dropped out. So yeah, that's like the big takeaway. Just like listen to your gut, and like don't be afraid to listen to your fear in a sense. Like don't give in to fear or anything, but like if you're like me and a few days into being into school, you say to yourself, I don't want to be here, and you give it a good effort of trying to make new friends and try to adjust to the environment, and it's just not working for you, don't force it. It's a dark road you can go down. And like I said, I wasn't suicidal. I had no thoughts of self-harm or anything like that. But I think had I stuck it out to the end of the semester and like came home with a report card full of Fs, I think I would have been much worse off. So just like listen to yourself. And being 17, 18 is difficult. I say that as somebody who's 33, who's gone through a bunch of life bullshit in the past 6 years, with my mom dying, moving so many times, and like career up and downs and breakups. And like, trust me, 17, 18, senior year of high school, first year of college is a really fun but very difficult time. And it's okay to feel like it is, because it really is. And just listen to your gut. And there's nothing wrong with not going to college. College in this country has only gotten more expensive. And because of the crippling debt of student loans, folks in my generation and generations after mine, younger folks have no chance at ever buying a house unless they get some crazy lucrative career. I've luckily paid off my student loans a few years ago, but it is a real huge decision that you are being asked to make at the age of 17 or 18 to saddle yourself with a humongous amount of debt for something that may not end up being for you. There is no shame in going to community college to just try it out. That's what it's there for. And believe me, like, you can take excellent classes at community college. I did at Nassau Community College. Like, it's a really good school. Famous people have gone through Nassau Community College. And if you have a great time there, great. Get your 2-year degree, transfer to another school, and have the dorm room life for a couple of years. Like, it's a great track. But it's also, there's nothing ignoble about not going to college and working a trade like my dad does. My dad was not a good high school student, but he was an excellent trade student. Here on Long Island, we have something called BOCES. I don't remember what it stands for, but basically it's like you go to high school, you take social studies, English, and gym, and then you go to another school, which is a trade school, and you learn carpentry, auto mechanics. Like, you learn to work with your hands. My dad took every single class available to him at that school, aside from like the beauty classes, like barbering and makeup, like all that sort of stuff. He took every one of those classes and learned so much, and he credits a lot of his successful career to those classes. There is nothing wrong with the trade. It's a great, great thing, and working and traveling and just living life outside of school is a wonderful thing, and it's something I cannot recommend enough to you. That said, if you're about to graduate high school and you cannot wait to go to college and you're super pumped, awesome. Do it. Don't let me talk you out of it. I'm not here to talk you out of it. I'm here talking to the folks who are on the fence and are maybe thinking college is not for them or not the best idea at this time. It may not be. Just go do something else. It's a big, wide world, and you will realize that as you get older. And trust me when I tell you, I dropped out of college twice, took a few years off, went back, did very well in college, did very well on a very competitive exam for a very competitive career, and decided I didn't even want it. And I changed directions again at the age of 26. So trust me, you have plenty of time to figure this out. And night school is actually really fun because you are there with people who actually want to be there 99% of the time. Because it's folks with active careers, with kids who are just doing this to better themselves. Night classes are the best thing you can do if you're going to go to school. Like, don't be afraid to get creative with how you do things. But yeah, so I've gone on for an hour. I hope this has been helpful to you. If you
I'll try to think of like a way to put together a career story for you. My career is still ongoing, and I feel like in some ways it's just kind of taking off. So might wait on that one, but that's my college story. It's a long one because it took a long time to get through, but I hope it's been helpful. And yeah, all right, let me know if there's any other topics you want to hear about. And as always, I'm Sweet Johnny Cage. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.